Hello and welcome to Car Retrospective, where today we've got America's first proper attempt at a mass-produced mid-engine sports car that unfortunately didn't stick, the Pontiac Fiero. Let's have a look. When you think of an American car, you probably picture a ginormous pickup truck as wide as a boat or some V8 pony car that seems unnecessarily powerful for how fast it can actually go. However, in the mid-1970s, some engineers at a little brand called Pontiac wanted to change this outlook. They conceived some ideas for a brand new mid-engine two-seater sports car that would be radically different for the time and for the country. However, General Motors, who operated Pontiac, shut the idea down. They didn't want to produce a second two-seater sports car because that might steal the thunder of the Chevy Corvette, despite that being front-engined. Previously, the Corvette itself had multiple concepts drawn up to be mid and even rear-engined, with the Stingray Corvette being brought up multiple times to fit the bill. Again, GM didn't like the idea and scrapped the idea of a mid-engine Corvette forever. Until 2019 with the C8 of course. But back on track, in 1978 the Pontiac designers returned to GM to present the Fiero in a different light, a more compact economy car with a 4-banger rather than a V6 that just so happened to look and feel like a sports car. The key to this presentation was that it wasn't a muscle car. At the time, GM didn't want to invest too heavily in muscle cars, they needed fuel efficiency over horsepower and speed. So what harm could a little economical yet sporty Pontiac really do? And with that, as well as a little help from a prototype model, the project was given the go-ahead. However, the problems started almost immediately. General Motors gave the project a minuscule budget of $400 million, and in manufacturing terms that really is nothing. Pontiac also conscripted executive Audi Quattro, sorry for the butchering, to oversee the project. Given the tiny budget, the Fiero became a bit of a Frankenstein's monster, with almost everything on and in it coming from the GM catalogue. A lot of the components were carried over from GM's X and T platforms, as well as using things like front brakes from pretty bland cars like the Chevrolet Chevette. Remember, the Fiero was originally conceived to be a mid-engine sports car to compete with the likes of Ferrari, and it's using parts from a Chevette. The engine also had its problems. As previously mentioned, the designers wanted to originally fit the Fiero with a proper aluminium block V6. Again, the budget and the need for fuel efficiency crossed that right off the list, so the designers had to settle for GM's 2.5 litre Iron Duke inline 4. More economical, yes, but not quite as nippy. Audi Quattro had further problems on top of this too. His engineers were split into two groups, so when designing the blueprints and trying to iron out problems, the blueprints were handed back and forth endlessly, eating into the already minuscule budget. One thing Audi Quattro didn't want to skimp out on, however, was the body. The Fiero was to be constructed out of a tubular space frame design, which would then be covered not in metal body panels, but plastic. This plastic design helped the Fiero to be 1, incredibly light, and 2, earn the highest possible crash test safety rating. Although by the time the design was finalised in the early 80s, the Fiero had become a shadow of its former self, equipped with a cumbersome engine carrying parts from other cars that masqueraded as a mid-engine European sports car. Still, the Fiero was a radical new design for GM's catalogue of motors, and they believed it could help in fending off the rising popularity of imports from Europe and Japan in the States. GM began production on the Pontiac Fiero in August of 1983 and launched it onto the market for the 1984 model year. 3 models were available: the Coupe, the Sports Coupe and the SE. The Coupe and the Sport Coupe were fair enough, but the SE featured quite a few upgrades on the trim and handling. One thing that wasn't top of the range, however, was the engine. Sure, the Iron Duke did deliver good fuel economy, but with a measly 92 horsepower coming out of it, the Fiero wasn't the quickest car ever made. Still, many would rather trade speed and power for an incredible 50 miles per gallon highway rating. I mean, even today that's incredible. But the Iron Duke had another problem, and yes, it does relate to the Fiero's, well, fiery history. Basically, the Iron Duke had a characteristically tall oil pan on top of the engine. This meant the centre of gravity on the Fiero was unnaturally high, so to combat this, the designers decided to make it smaller. Problem solved, right? Well, by making the oil pan smaller, you guessed it, the Fiero had a smaller oil reserve. You could get it topped up more regularly, sure, but let's say theoretically that this smaller amount of oil runs out, the resulting friction creates quite a lot of heat, and then before you know it, boom, your Fiero is suddenly living up to its name just a little too much. There were also numerous reports of oil leaking directly onto the hot exhaust elements, again different method but same outcome. Fire. This problem got extensive media coverage over the following months after the Fiero's debut, and estimates were made that in 1987, every month, 20 1984 Fieros would catch fire. That really isn't a good look. A look made even worse when multiple reports were made of Fieros catching fire during test drives for reviews. How much worse could it get? Still, not all launches are as smooth as butter, and Pontiac soldiered on into 1985 with high hopes for the Fiero. One notable change, GM finally had the revolutionary idea to fit the Fiero with a proper 2.8 litre V6 pumping out a much more respectable 140 horsepower. While the Iron Duke iteration of the Fiero was solely a commuter car, 1985 V6 models erred slightly more on the side of sportiness. 1986 then brought us the Fiero GT, truly a sports car by this point. It introduced a brand new fastback body style, dual exhaust, new rims, the works. 1987 then saw the introduction of the Fiero Mira, which featured a drastically different looking body, and it honestly looked pretty handsome, in the same way that, say, a Ferrari 308 looks pretty handsome. Yeah, let's not beat around the bush, this is just a Ferrari 308, completely unofficial. Only 247 Miras were built before our good pals over at Ferrari stepped in and did what they do best, sue the pants off of them. The last big change that the Fiero saw was for the 1988 model year, where the car finally got the suspension that it deserved from the start. No longer was the suspension tacked on from another cheap car, it got specially designed control arms and knuckles. In fact, they were so well designed that many mistook them for a Lotus design. Some might say that that's an offhanded compliment because, let's face it, Lotus do know how to build a good handling car. The engine also received minor upgrades for better power delivery and efficiency, but just as the Fiero was finally graced with a proper engine and suspension, it all had to come to an end. The public image surrounding the Fiero by this point had become so negative that GM was forced to shut production down, mainly because of all the recalls they had to do on earlier models. And yes, the upsetting thing is, all this negative press was coming from the original 1984 models with the low engine oil problem resulting in fires, and not the more recent models with all the upgrades. Therefore, the last Fiero rolled off the production line in August of 1988. All of this could have been avoided if GM had just committed to building a fully fledged Fiero from the start. If Pontiac had been given a higher budget, the 1984 model would have been very similar to the later models, which were actually good cars. Still, the Fiero has earned itself a bit of a cult following since it ended production. While most dabble with engine swaps with such things as the Cadillac 4.9 litre and the North Star V8, there are also those who turn their Fieros into Italian supercar replicas. Whatever suits you. And there it is, the Pontiac Fiero, likely the textbook example of why you need to sometimes commit to pushing the boat out. GM needed a new halo car to revitalise their range, but when faced with actually doing it, they bottled it and gave it minimum attention. Sure, the early models aren't really that desirable, but those 1988 beasts, I'll take 3. Thank you so much for watching that video, with a very special thanks to Ben Wright and Bryn Palmer, who are very generously donating at the highest tier on my Patreon. Just £1 a month is an amazing help, and I also have a Discord server and an Instagram page, links in the description below. Again, thank you for watching and take care.